What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to College Football Talk with Peter Burtonette. In today's episode, I'm going to be starting my three-part series on the Big Ten. In this video, I'm going to be going over the teams that I think are going to be mostly fighting for bowl eligibility. In this case, it's teams that I think are either trying to avoid finishing at the bottom of the conference or maybe fighting to break into that outside group of contenders. But really, highlighting in this video the teams that I think will either be able to make a bowl or teams that will not, and especially kind of giving like a verdict on whether they get more wins or fewer or maybe even to their wins last year. But before I get into it, if you go on to enjoy this video, please feel free to leave a like, consider subscribing to the channel, and turn on those post notifications so you're always up to date whenever I upload. Getting things started, team projected by many, probably most, to finish at the bottom of the conference, if not all, is Purdue, who finished 1-11 last year. They had a mass exodus from one of, if not one of the worst Power 4 teams ever. They had a minus 14 turnover margin. No statistical category did they rank higher than 110th when it comes to scoring, either offense or defense, running, passing, or total offense or defense. The one positive, Devin Mockabee, their running back, is a pretty good running back. He put up some good numbers last year. I'll pop those up on screen. Kind of a sign of where things are at for the Boilermakers is that quarterback Ryan Brown announced his transfer to North Carolina and then decided to come back. So I guess it's at least a positive that he did decide to come back. But anyways, Nitro Tuggle is coming in from Georgia. He adds kind of a bit of excitement to the offense. And then defensively, C.J. Madden, the defensive end, was injured most of last year, so he comes back. Auburn transfer T.J. Lindsey is added to the line. He should be a good impact player. Jamarian Harkless, also a defensive tackle. And then linebackers Manny Powell and Charles Correa come over to the team with Barry Odom, who was the coach at UNLV, so both those players come over from the Running Rebels. Defensive back, again, kind of a sign of where this team is at. 15 guys left the program in the transfer portal just in the secondary alone. So, to me, really, the only way for Purdue is up. The question is just how far can they even get up? I don't think it's much in a very stacked Big Ten conference. Their schedule kind of illustrates that. Home against USC, at Notre Dame, home against Illinois, at Michigan, home against Ohio State, at Washington, and home against Indiana. I do think their non-conference schedule sets up a little more favorably than it did last year, and they might be able to steal one win in conference, but I think plus 2 wins is about the best they can hope for this year. I do think they do that, get to 3-9, not enough to make a bowl game. Next up is Northwestern, finished 4-8 last year. Their offense gave Purdue a run for their money as probably one of the worst Power 4 offenses last year. They will be a little bit revitalized this year, though. SMU grad transfer quarterback Preston Stone comes in. He's thrown for over 4,000 passing yards in his career and has a 35-8 touchdown interception ratio. Griffin Wild comes in from South Dakota State, an 1,100-yard receiver with 12 touchdowns, and then running back Cam Porter is back as well. At left tackle, a guy who will protect Preston Stone in the pocket, Caleb Tiernan is an NFL-caliber talent. Switching gears over to the defense, they should be much better than the offense was, at least. That's kind of what you expect out of the Wildcats. Aiden Hubbard is their main guy on the defensive line. He's joined by Richie Haggerty, who's returning from injury. Linebacker Mac Uhline. Honestly, kind of struggling with that one, but hopefully I got that right. And then safety Damon Walters, who is an All-Big Ten honorable mention. Their key games, got a tough non-conference game at Tulane, one of the contenders in the American Conference. Then home against Oregon, at Penn State, at Nebraska, at USC. That's a tough string of road games there. Home against Michigan and at Illinois. Based on that schedule and kind of where they stack up against the rest of the Big Ten, even the teams that are comparable, I think they probably finish even with their record last year. Another 4-8 season for David Braun at head coach, and I don't think they make a bowl game. Next up is Rutgers. And sitting at 7-6, you might think this is a little bit low, but that kind of maybe shows just how deep this conference is. And again, this is based kind of on projections. I use Athlon Sports specifically when I'm going over this order, but I would say it's probably fairly close to the national consensus. The Scarlet Knights had a 4-game losing streak in the middle of last season after a 4-0 start. They then finished 3-1, but lost their bowl game, so 3-2 finish. They do have consistency on the offensive line, continuity there, and at quarterback, Ethan Kaliak-Manis, and then wide receivers Ian Strong and KJ Duff are back. CJ Campbell comes in from Florida Atlantic to replace 1,200-yard rusher Kyle Monanjai. He was a really good running back for Rutgers. So Campbell's definitely going to have some big shoes to fill, but he's a good back in his own right. Shifting gears to defense, defensive ends Eric O'Neill from James Madison and Bradley Weaver from Ohio combined for 21.5 sacks last year at their respective schools. And then linebacker Daryl Jabomi comes in with 105 tackles. He returns. And then cornerback Bo Masco had a pretty good redshirt freshman season last year. Cam Miller from Penn State and Jacoby Henderson from Marshall also kind of bolstered this defensive backfield. I think for Rutgers, a 4-0 start is a possibility. I think anything as good as maybe even 5-1 is also possible. They're home against Ohio, home against Miami, Ohio, a couple of good MAC schools, but I think Rutgers can beat both of those teams. Home against Norfolk State, home against Iowa, at Minnesota, at Washington. Those last three, I don't think they win all three of those, but I could see them winning 2 out of 3 of those. But I could also see them losing all 3. So that will be a really important stretch, those 3 games, because then their back half is loaded with home games against Oregon and Penn State and road games against Illinois and Ohio State. I don't see them winning any of those 4. So if they can get through with a 5-1 record in those first 6 games, I think they do match their record last year, and I think they will do that. I think they finish even 7-5, and they do make a bowl game. Next up is Maryland, who went 4-8 last year. They had the number 17 passing offense in college football, but gone is quarterback Billy Edwards Jr. Instead, in is quarterback Malik Washington, a highly touted freshman quarterback, one of the top recruits really in Maryland's history, at least recently. He'll be joined by Nolan Ray in the backfield. He rushed for 374 yards and 2 touchdowns. And then wide receiver transfers Jalil Farouk from Oklahoma and Caleb Webb from Tennessee. He's also got 2 guys on the right side of his line who are experienced and some pretty talented players as well. Defensively, the defensive backfield, the secondary is their most experienced unit. Jamare Glasker and Dante Joyner at cornerback, and then safety Jalen Husky are guys that kind of lead that unit. But otherwise, a lot of retooling that'll be needed. They have a new defensive coordinator. In terms of their schedule, some key games at Wisconsin, home against Washington and Nebraska, at UCLA, home against Indiana, at Rutgers, at Illinois, home against Michigan, and a neutral site game against Michigan State at Ford Field in Detroit. I think this team, a lot of those games I listed is because those are teams that are kind of comparable. So if they can win those games against teams like a Washington even, I think Washington's a little higher in the conference, same with Nebraska. UCLA, Rutgers are really the teams that are right there with them, and Wisconsin. If they can win 2 out of 3 of those, especially those latter 3 that I mentioned, Wisconsin, UCLA, and Rutgers, and I guess Michigan State as well, if they can go even 2-2 in those games, I think they do finish a little bit better. I will go with +1 wins for this team. I could also see them finishing 4-8 again, though. Either way, I do not think the Terrapins make a bowl game. Next up, Michigan State. They went 5-7 last year. Head coach Jonathan Smith has his quarterback returning again, Aiden Childs. He was a lot better in the second half of the season. He was 56% completion percentage and had a 5-8 touchdown interception ratio in the first 5 games. He then improved by 5% in his completion percentage to 61 and turned that touchdown interception ratio around to 8-3. Nick Marsh is his leading returning receiver, and Omari Kelly comes in from Middle Tennessee State. He had 869 receiving yards. Jack Velling at tight end also is a really good, reliable weapon, but the Spartans must improve their running. They ranked 110th last year. The offensive line will be really new, but they bring in some big transfers, including All-ACC honorable mention Matt Golbin from Wake Forest. Defensively, this team did really well against the run, ranking 32nd and then 34th total. Had a -8 turnover margin, though, so they didn't do a great job of taking care of it, nor of creating turnovers. But that ability to stop the run will be big. Defensive end, Jalen Thompson, and defensive tackle, Alex Van Summerin are two guys on the line of scrimmage. And then the back half, they have a couple playmaking safeties, Nikai Martinez and Malik Spencer. Also, special shout out here, don't often do this for specialists, but punter Ryan Eckley was an all Big Ten, I think, first team selection at punter. He's probably one of the best punters in the nation. I actually mentioned him in my video ranking the top 5 secondaries and specialists, I guess, in college football, because he had, I think, with the top, if not one of the top, if not the top punt average. So he's also going to be important in switching the field for the Spartans. They've also got what I think is a pretty manageable schedule. Their toughest games at USC, at Nebraska, at Indiana, home against Michigan, home against Penn State, and at Iowa. I think those last 3, they probably lose all 3. You never know in that rivalry, though, that against Michigan, though they've kind of, they've really, the Wolverines have dominated that recently. But Penn State, it's possible to pull an upset. I don't see it. Penn State looks really good this year, and at Iowa. But those other 3 games, the first 3, all on the road, but I could see them potentially getting 1, if not 2 of those 3 games. I think they improve by a couple. I think Aiden Childs gets more comfortable in the offense. I think they finish 7-5 and do get back to a bowl game. UCLA is the next stop on our journey around the Big Ten teams fighting for bowl eligibility. They were 5-7 last year, but the big story for them is the buzz that surrounded the transfer of Nico Iamaleava from Tennessee. The young quarterback put up some good numbers for the Volunteers, kind of almost dwindled in big situations, some questionable decisions here and there, but that's to be expected from a young guy. I think he's got a lot of room to improve. He's shown a lot of promise. Obviously, it was a whole saga, drama around him moving from Tennessee, but he's a talented player. Quasi Gilmer will be his top target. He's UCLA's leading returning receiver. Running backs, Jalen Berger, and then Javian Thomas coming in from Cal. And he's also joined by slot receiver Mikey Matthews, also coming in from Berkeley. This team also was really good against the run, but they lose everybody but Siale Taupaki, who's a defensive tackle for this team. So they're going to have a lot of different players to replace. The good thing is, though, they got a lot of guys coming in from the portal. Defensive end transfers, Nico Davillier from Arkansas, Anthony Jones from Michigan State, linebackers, Isaiah Chisholm from Oregon State, Ben Perry from Louisville, who also doubles as a safety, kind of in that like nickel position role. Safeties, Key Lawrence from Ole Miss and Byron Thomas from Central Florida. So a lot of additions on defense. They get started with couple challenging non-conference games, home against Utah and at Dan Mullen's UNLV. Mullen replacing Barry Odom, who I mentioned earlier in this video. Home against Penn State, at Indiana, or home against Nebraska, at Ohio State, home against Washington, and at USC. I think that influx of talent will lead the Bruins to be a little bit better than last year, but I think this conference that they're in is just too deep for them to really break in much more than that. I can see them finishing, again, +1 win, 6-6 record, probably make a bowl game, but overall, I think UCLA is probably going to be outside of that contender range. Finally, the last team in this video, before I talk about the contenders in my next video, Wisconsin. They were 5-7 last year, snapped a 22-year streak of making bowl games, and the Luke Fickell tenure is getting pretty fickle right now. They do have a good dual-threat quarterback coming in, Billy Edwards Jr. from Maryland. Running backs who he'll rely on, Darian Dupree and Cade Yakimelli. Wide receivers, Vincent Anthony and Ohio State transfer Jaden Ballard are a couple of guys that he'll be passing the ball to. Defensively, the Badgers were really good against the pass last year. They were 14th nationally. Cornerback Ricardo Hallman was an All-Big Ten selection, and then Preston Zachman also had some good numbers. They also make some good additions. Corey Walker comes in, an edge rusher from Western Michigan who had 5.5 sacks last year. Ben Barton at defensive tackle, and then a good linebacker trio of Darrell Peterson, Christian Allegro, who had 66 tackles in a season where he only had 3 starts. Got a lot of playing time, but only started 3 times. And then Mason Reiger comes in from Louisville, who missed last season from an injury, but was pretty good in 2023. Now, their schedule has gotten a lot of attention. Joel Klatt talked about it, how he said he didn't really see more than 3 wins on that schedule. And I would fall somewhere between agreeing with him and thinking that the Badgers team is maybe a little bit better than he's giving them credit for. It is a tough schedule, though. I'll list off their games here, and it's 9 of them that are losable games. At Alabama, at Michigan, home against Iowa, home against Ohio State, at Oregon, home against Washington, at Indiana, home against Illinois, and at Minnesota. For a team that is kind of what I would say is kind of projected to be in the middle of the Big Ten Conference, they face just about as many of those teams that are ahead of them as they possibly could. So, yes, if they show signs of improvement and are able to beat a couple of those teams, they'll break through. But I kind of reevaluating my original decision here, it's hard to see too much improvement. And because of their schedule, like if I was just talking about Wisconsin and based on whether I think they finished better than they did last year just because of what they have coming back and what they have coming in from the portal, I would say, yeah, I probably do think they can win a game or two more. But because of this schedule, I think it'll be really difficult just to get back to how they finished last year. I think 5-7 is optimistic. I think 4-8 is probably a little more realistic. So if I had to, put my money where my mouth is, I would probably say Wisconsin finishes with one fewer win, and that would put them at 4-8 and outside of a bowl game. And if that's the case, I think Luke Fickell will be certainly on the hot seat, if not on his way out of Madison. But that's all for this episode of College Football Talk. My next one, I'll be talking about all the contenders in the Big Ten, all the dark horse contenders in the Big Ten, kind of those teams that are like 11 through 5 in the Big Ten standings that have a chance to maybe break into the contenders, but they'll need to, really focus in on their areas of strength or improve in some areas. So, again, that's all for this episode of College Football Talk. I'm your host, Peter Burnett, signing out. Peace.